Hey, thanks for listening to another episode of the Sell More Online podcast. I'm your host, Dan Erickson. Today's episode is going to be a bit different than anyone I've ever done. Honestly, I'm a little uncomfortable and weirded by it, but I think because I don't have a ton of listeners at the moment, because I've kind of let this thing fizzle off, this would be a good time for me to do it and just kind of record it for the future, I guess. So today's episode, I'm going to give you a bit of my backstory, going way back to childhood, and then hopefully coming towards today without taking too much time on the podcast. This intro's already too long, and if I go at this rate, we're going to have a long podcast, so I should probably jump in. As a young kid, my earliest memory of life revolved around my mom and dad fighting. I was very small. I had these things still exist. I see them from time to time. They're nowhere near the same as they were when I was a kid. We're talking early 80s. But I had one of these little pull toys that had blocks in it. And the blocks were, those blocks that have like letters on all the sides and you can arrange it and make words and stuff. And the pull toy was like a little wagon. I'm thinking it probably fit like a 4x6 grid of these blocks. And I had too many, so I would stack them up and make like a pyramid. And I would pull that around in our trailer. We grew up without a lot of money and in a trailer park, which is totally cool. I'm not saying that disparagingly, just my life has changed drastically since then. And yeah, that's my earliest memory. And go figure, that memory segued into my parents eventually getting divorced. My mother, who is a wonderful person, she's still alive. She still lives in Arizona. I grew up in Arizona. She's a great person. She was unable to fully take care of me, without getting into too much detail. There's a lot of caveats and stuff to that, but without getting into too much detail, she was unable to fully take care of me when I was young. And so my grandparents took over raising me, specifically in, what was it? Probably junior high school. Just because the other option would have been to move across town, and we lived in Tucson, a pretty sprawled town. My other option would have been to move to the other side of Tucson and go to a school there. I had been going to private schools my whole life, actually. My grandparents had enough money to be able to put me through private schooling, and I had a friend group, and so that was one of the main factors too, that and just general ability to raise a child. That all fell on my grandparents when I was still pretty young. So I grew up, spent the rest of my life growing up with my grandparents. It would have been grade school. It would have been before junior high, the more I'm thinking about this. Anyway, I grew up as an only child. Some of that probably comes through in my podcasts. I'm very good at talking to myself. So went to private schooling my whole life, up until college. For college, I decided I was not sure what I wanted to do, so I was going to get the basics out of the way for cheap at the local community college. I was about 2 credits away from my associate's degree, and I was just like, I'm done with this. I don't enjoy going to school. I don't know that was wise or unwise. I'm not entirely sure. Life is still playing out, and I'm still going to figure out whether or not I'm sad I don't have a degree of any sort. But the idea was to get the associates there and then transfer to I had like 7 or 8 schools that accepted me. Of course, I would have had to reapply, but I had a few options available. And anyhow, that's not how it played out, because I ended up getting so my first job was working for my grandfather's company. It was a blueprinting, copying center. It's basically, think of like a Kinko's or whatever, but made for architects. So people who have big drawings of the buildings that they need to build and so forth. We made copies for them on these huge, like 24 by 36 or 30 by, 30, man, I'm forgetting this. It's been long enough. It's like 30 by 42. They had a couple main sizes and a whole bunch of weird sizes in the middle. But blueprinting machine is pretty cool because it uses ammonia to develop a print, and ammonia turns this special chemical layer on the paper. It turns it blue, and light makes it dissolve. So you'd run it through this machine, and you'd put a basically translucent print on top that has like the diagram on it. And it would go through the light first, and it would dissolve all the chemical that wasn't covered by lines for the drawing. And then it would run the rest through the ammonia, which would then develop that, making it blue, which is why they call it a blueprint. But basically, that's what it was. It was copies. That's way too much information there, but it was a fun job. I actually think of all the like just kind of jobs I've worked, that one was a ton of fun. And I actually haven't worked all that many jobs. So I went from there to, and this is when I ended up dropping out of community college, is I went to work for America Online. Now, this was back right at the tip of their heyday. So America Online was right at the stage where they were huge, and a lot of the leadership was retiring with massive pensions and massive stock payouts. And I was coming in, and I thought, man, this is the place to be. Like, I don't even have to be someone, but part of the compensation, it was stock. And so I could earn stock and sell that stock and eventually be rich. Well, best laid plans don't always work out. I worked for America Online for 3 years. I hated it. A good chunk of my time was spent on the phones talking to people and helping them through their computer. Like I was a support rep for Apple. And this was back before Apple was what it is today. And there was known issues with the America Online software that always happened on Apple computers. Like regardless of what you do, you're eventually going to hit this problem. And so I spent 90% of my life telling the same thing over and over and over, and having people call in for the 10th time saying, look, I even know how to fix this. I don't need you to tell me. I'm just frustrated that I still have to fix this. And having to say, yeah, I'm sorry. There isn't anything we can do for you. Just keep doing it. It was an interesting experiment. What I can tell you is my biggest lesson from America Online is the lesson of customer service. Now, I'm proud of this. We'll fast forward to where I'm not proud, but I'm proud of this. Working for America Online, in my first 2 months on the phone, both times I made what they called, I think it was called the 90-90 Club. I could be butchering that a little, but it's something like that, where it was 90% or better positive reviews for like friendliness and willingness to be helpful, kind of like the personality of the person helping. And then 90% on the technical knowledge side, which was really cool because I just started the job and honestly didn't know that much. So somehow I was able to convince people that I knew more than I did, or through the systems that AOL had, I was able to be smart when I wasn't. I was the first person at that entry level to have done that. So I was pretty excited about that, at least at our Arizona call center. So fast forward with time, I worked there 3 years, and by the end of the third year, I was kind of done. I had taken a stint away. They gave some of us a chance to go join the QA team, which is quality assurance. Basically making sure that the product is working and new versions are ready before they come out. So my job was to break them. And I spent, how much? It was about 6 months trying to break AOL software, which to be honest was very easy. And then they would ship it to production when they were ready. After that 6 month stint, I got put back on the phones, and that was when I was done. I was kind of disillusioned. Just wasn't for me. And I was also a young kid and stupid, and rather than fight through, because it was a pretty good paying job, I just started doing stupid things like hanging up on angry customers and things like that, which you should never do if you're in a phone service business. So yeah, I was let go, and that was an interesting experience. I'd love to say that I've always been that amazing worker and never encountered that, but that would be false. I was let go from AOL. A lot of it because of making bad decisions. There were some things that were a little unfair. The final straw was an irate caller who was verbally abusing me, and I hung up on him. But that was the end. With a history of having done that at least a few times, that I didn't have an excuse on that one. So anyhow, after that, I didn't have a job for a couple months. I was accruing credit card debt, which I'd already had because, honestly, I was a dumb kid. I wanted to buy a TV. I didn't have the money for the TV. I bought it anyhow on a credit card. Then I just didn't want to pay my credit card off because I could use the money on other things. And I was actually making pretty good money, is the sad part of that. Like, for my age, it was, I was making about $18 an hour, which back in the late 90s was a whole lot more than it is today. And compared to a lot of people in Tucson, that was actually a pretty good wage. And I was, 19? That said, I was wasting my money, spending it on dumb things. And then, I accrued credit card debt, accrued credit card debt, and started getting collections calls. My credit was just gone. And it was all for like a couple $1,000s, which back then obviously is more than it is today, but still, it was only a couple $1,000s that I was destroying my credit over. I could have smartly gotten rid of that. So with that, my uncle had started a coffee roasting company in Washington, and I've talked about this in the past. I won't go too much into detail here, but he found out that I had lost my job and gave me a call and said, "Hey, do you want to come work for me? And eventually, I'll make you part owner of this business." And I said, yeah, that would be great. I need to do something. And I'd always wanted to live in Washington, Washington State on the coast. It's quite beautiful. He lived on an island. I initially moved on the mainland right next to the island, but it was kind of like, man, this is a dream. I've got no money. I've got nothing. I'm not sure what I'm going to do next. My grandparents had to help me out a little bit. And all of a sudden now I can move to this area that's pretty much my dream area, and do kind of something fun. I've always loved coffee. I didn't know anything about it at the time, but I'd always loved it. So sure enough, I pick up after my 21st birthday and I head out to Washington State. My grandparents, you can see the recurring theme. They've always been a big part of my life until they passed away. But my grandparents had a summer home in Washington, and then they'd stay there for a few months, and then they'd spend the winters down in Arizona. They call those snowbirds, for those who don't know. I was able to stay at their summer home, and I basically lived with them for like 4 months, and then they were gone, and I had the whole place to myself for the rest of the year. Which worked out really well in the beginning because I wasn't getting paid very much. It was kind of like a trial by fire type arrangement. I'll pay you just enough so you can buy food, and you're living with your grandparents, so you don't need any more. And got going. Started working, started learning. I got to learn a whole lot about what it is to run a business. I could say this. There was a family dynamic that in the end is what destroyed the relationship. And so with that, there's still, some things that feel pretty negative, and we did our best to repair it, and I'm beyond it now. But what I can say is that I learned a lot about how I don't want to run a business. And I think that's okay to say because there's multiple ways to do things. I'm never going to be your Elon Musk or your Jeff Bezos. If I ever do, it's going to be by pure dumb luck. Mostly because I am not willing to do the things that are necessary to achieve that level of success. Just watching our business, start from, a very, very small business in a converted garage to actually having, property and buildings and a full-on roasting facility, and just watching that happen and the things that we had to do to get to that point, a lot of things made me uncomfortable. They weren't necessarily wrong, although there were things that were wrong. It just, there's a lot of deception. There's a lot of finagling rules. There's a lot of breaking rules. And sometimes the rules were stupid. Like the government was putting dumb rules on us. And the only way for us to succeed was to break them. And I get that. I'm not saying necessarily that things are bad or good. I'm just saying that I was uncomfortable with that scenario. I'm one who likes to live within defined boundaries, within rules. And I don't mind stretching the rules, but I don't want to break them. So the coffee company was a great job. It was a great experience. And of course, I ended up becoming part owner of the company, which was a really cool thing. But yeah, I kind of glazed over a bunch of stuff here. Glazed? I don't know. Glazed is now a word with the cool kids, but I kind of glossed over some of it. So kind of going back, I started working with my uncle and learning kind of the difference between being an employee and being a owner and being a manager and the different roles. In my previous 2 jobs, I was literally bottom cog of the machine. I was the least important. If in the case of a machine, if this cog fell off the machine, it would keep running. Nothing would matter. It might get a little dirty in the corner, but otherwise the machine's just fine. Moving to the coffee roaster, I quickly became a very important piece. We started off on these small air roasters that use a fluid bed of air to roast your coffee. They each did a pound a piece. So you can imagine as we grew, it takes, roughly, let's say 10 minutes for the sake of a quick example. It takes 10 minutes to do a pound of coffee, and you've got 2 of them. So you can get 2 pounds of coffee done in 10 minutes. Well, you could see how when you're having to do 100 pounds of coffee, how much time that takes. And so we had a few all-nighters where I would stay up till 3 or 4 a.m. roasting, and then my uncle would come out and take over, and I'd go sleep on his couch, just so we could fill orders. And then so we finally bought a roasting machine that was huge at the time. It was a 12 kilogram roaster, which means it did roughly 20 pounds of coffee at a time. That felt so unnecessary. However, we quickly grew into it. That 12 kilogram roaster, my uncle never learned to use and didn't want to, because as the business owner, he wanted people smarter than him to be able to do that. And so I don't know that I was smarter than him, but that was always his answer. I want people smarter than me to do it. So my job became the roasting. It became running parts of the business. We were also a web business. We sold all of our coffee online, and I was literally the only person who even remotely understood the web in the company. I built the first few websites. They were horrific. Even at that period of time, they weren't great. But now when I look back on the Wayback Archive and I look back to see them, it's like, oh my goodness, those are horrible. But yeah, I became actually pretty crucial. There were times in the business that if I had left, it would have severely hurt. Like maybe not killed it because my uncle was a pretty passionate, he was a guy who wasn't going to let it die, but it would have caused a lot of problems because I literally was the only person in the company who knew how to run the company in specific areas. Obviously, my uncle brought in a lot of the business knowledge and a lot of the connections, and he was very good at making connections where I was not. And so we had kind of a good thing going. There were a few times the family dynamic got a little strange, and either he was like, I don't want to work with you anymore, or I was like, I don't want to work with you anymore. And then within 4 hours it was over and we were back because we just couldn't do that. But as time progressed, we built up our business. We hired, and my uncle in specific was never happy building a business. It was too, I guess, boring for him. He had to build multiple businesses, which I understand. I'm to the point now where I've got my fingers in multiple pots too, but I think the difference is I still have my primary focus, my primary, like the thing that matters most to me. And that's, in this case, that's Wapiti. Back then it was, it was the coffee company. It was exactly, what we had started, and his focus had diverted, and he was building, a frozen drink base, and he was building a chain of espresso restaurants for franchising, and he was working with companies in the Middle East and building a system for teaching training for espresso. They all had connections to the coffee industry, but they were all so far different from what we were actually working on. And he never thought about the coffee company at all, or very, very little, except when he found something that he didn't like that I did, or he was just in a mood, and he would call me to his office and we would go at it. For me, it was like, dude, you're not even paying attention to this. As a matter of fact, you're making it hard for me to pay attention because you're asking me to do things for these other businesses that I am not involved in. And furthermore, you're going to come and criticize the way I'm doing something over here, but you're not a part. You don't understand. And of course, there were other things. But what ended up happening, and of course, that's my perspective. He's going to have a different perspective. What ended up happening is by the end, it had gotten pretty toxic. And I started this company. I started what was at the time called Brand Chowder, and that's still the parent company name. I started it on the side, and I did it because I was so unhappy with what I was doing, yet I loved what I had been doing. So it was a really interesting dichotomy. So I started this company, and this was working for a few months alongside the coffee company. And finally, I told my uncle, I was like, I'm leaving. I can't deal with this dynamic anymore. Things have changed. He tried bringing in multiple other business partners to, for multiple reasons, but mostly because he didn't want me as his partner any longer. And so he was trying to find people he could align with and trust and work with instead of me. And that was obvious from the first one, but after about the third or fourth, hey, this guy's going to now be my partner. It was like, yeah, okay, I get it. You don't want me here. And so we parted ways, and I went full into Brand Chowder. Now, I didn't know what Brand Chowder was. I knew that as a business owner working with a coffee company, one of the things I wanted the most was help. My uncle never wanted to help. He wanted to do his thing and then come and basically lay into me for things he didn't like that was happening in my area. And as I explained from my backstory, I was never really trained. I had two jobs as basically a cog in a machine, and then I come and I'm supposed to be one of the main parts of the machine, but I didn't know how to do that. And then with that, there were certain things that were kept close to the chest. I was never allowed to see the financials. I'm supposed to run a company, but was never allowed to see the financials of the company to understand what was working, what wasn't working, to see, how much is going out in payroll, how much is, it was like a fake running of a company in some regards. I could only run from the small portal window that I was given to look out, not from a full view of the company. So I had never fully learned to run a business. And so after doing that for, 12 years? 12 years I was in the coffee roasting business, and leaving and making Brand Chowder my full-time job. It was tough because first off, Brand Chowder was small. It was definitely a side hustle at the time. I wasn't even making $1,000 a month. And, now we're talking, the 2013 is when I started Brand Chowder. So it would have been probably 2014, mid 2014 that this was all going down. I had a business partner at the time. We ended up getting one particular client that was both a dream from a financial perspective. Initially, we were actually able to do a lot of work for them, but also a nightmare from a relationship standpoint. They wanted to promise things they shouldn't to their clients, and we were working as a white labeled or outsourced agency for them. And then they expected us to deliver on these promises that just couldn't be fulfilled. And we would explain to them why, and eventually that's what soured the relationship. They wanted somebody who could deliver on promises that they couldn't. And They ended up going out of business not too much longer after we had left, because a lot of that. You can't. You got to have realistic expectations on both sides. But that was a blessing in the beginning, because we were still not making normal paychecks, but we were able to each bring home, a couple $1,000s just from them each month. Nowadays, that's a good client, not necessarily a dream client, but back then at that size and at the fact we were new, that was an amazing amount of money each month. And so I ended up having to learn to manage and run a business on my own. After supposedly having done that for 12 years prior, I had to learn about the financials. That was a huge thing. Sorry, I had to get a drink there. I had to learn, I had the customer relation thing down. I learned that at America Online. Working for my coffee company, a lot of our customers would compliment my ability to take care of their needs and to take care of them and to make them feel happy when they weren't. And that's something that I think I've always had the ability to do if I wanted to. But yeah, learning how to deal with a lot of different things that I never had to deal with, thinking that I was more equipped than I was. So when Branch Outer started, I started it with the purpose of helping small businesses, because that's honestly what I wanted at the coffee company. I wanted someone who could help me. And I had to figure out a lot of stuff on my own. And I thought, well, I had to do this all on my own. Now I can have a business that will offer this to others. Well, my flaw in that thinking was that most business people have a support network. Whether it's, a partner who works with them, or it's an actual, connection to, I don't know, I don't like chambers of commerces, but maybe a chamber of commerce that's actually functional and they're actually able to connect with other business people, or it's just a group of business people who get together and talk about things, a support group. Most business people have that, especially if they're still in business. Those who don't have that are the businesses who typically tend to struggle. And so I quickly found out that businesses don't just want somebody to help them. They want somebody to do something that helps them. And so I pivoted away from that towards working on websites and marketing. And the website was actually a part of the marketing. So I should say we were a marketing company, but the websites became the reason people would come to us. And with time, we realized that most businesses only want you to do marketing for them if you can prove that you can do the website for them first. That was always the entry thing for my business is, okay, we'll work with you on marketing, but first we need to get a good website. Let's do that. So we would do the website, and 99% of cases, then the customers would say, okay, here's the marketing we need to work on, because they were happy with what we did. But we did have a couple scenarios where they were like, we hate this, and my team's kind of like, well, we did what you asked us to. I'm not sure how, but there's going to be that small percentage of people who just aren't happy with what you do. And to be fair, if they're not happy with the website, they probably won't be happy with the marketing. That's probably fine. It's probably a good way to dip your toes in the water and move on. With time, I realized that marketing is not my shtick. I can do marketing. I know, my people on my team are able to do marketing, but realistically, marketing was not my thing. I wasn't good at some of it. Purely doing Google ads. I had a client that I did Google ads for, and I did it for him for a couple years. And he did, all sorts of floor cleaning type and window cleaning and house cleaning stuff. And we were actually pretty successful for the guy from an ads perspective. But he decided that carpet cleaning he doesn't make enough money on, and he can't raise his prices because then he just is out of the realm of possibility. And so he decided to cut carpet cleaning. Well, 90% of the stuff we sent him was people wanting carpet cleaning, because carpet cleaning is kind of an ongoing thing for a lot of people. And that just killed a lot of the campaign. Then he cut a couple other things, window cleaning and a couple other things. And so we basically were down to 1% of what was coming in was still coming in that was useful, and we had to axe all the other stuff. It's fine, but I realized that was not a forte of mine. Like the fact that it was doing well in the beginning was probably due to how wide open the net was, and probably got him a lot of lowest common denominator stuff rather than stuff you actually needed. So I ended up making relationships with people who do that, and I exited marketing altogether. There's only two exceptions to that, and that's email marketing. We don't write the copy, but we will handle the creation, the sending, and the analytics on that. And then, of course, search engine optimization is marketing, and I mean, to be fair, your website is marketing, and we handle that, but more because that's a function of the web than that's a function of marketing. And to be realistic, marketers rarely know how to do SEO properly. And so as the people who do the system side now, we want to do that because we want to do a good job for our client. So that's kind of my backstory. I mean, you basically have heard from my childhood, kind of went quickly through school, but my various businesses and jobs that I've been a part of to where I am today with Wapiti. I don't know why I felt it necessary to make a whole episode on my life. I think there's just been enough in my life that I've learned a lot, and I've learned most things the hard way. But I've learned them, and I'm 45 now. I'm old by the standards of a lot of people in this industry. But my team and myself, I'm not going to throw myself under the bus here. Myself and my team are very good at what we do, and we are often heads and tails above our competitors, and even our best competitors. We trade blows with them, and these are young, hip, funded teams, and yet the end product on the outside isn't really all that different. And oftentimes, these young, hip teams try to build something that's amazing looking, and they do. I've seen some websites that I'm like, dang, this is awesome. My team does not do this. But that's the problem. I don't want a website that's just awesome. I want one that functions, and my team is the best. I'm sure there's other people in the world that are really good, but from what I've seen and what I've encountered, we are hands down the best at building converting sites that send people to your call to action, sites that change the financial flow. I have a few clients that just building a brand new site for them increased their sales to the point a couple of them paid for their website cost within a few months based on increased sales that had no other explanation than that the website got a refresh. I talk with people and I give them a quote, and sometimes they want a lot of stuff, and I'm like, okay, that's going to be a $12,000 site. And of course they immediately go, oh, I can't afford that. And I get it. Like $12,000 is a lot of money, but man, if that $12,000 earns you $24,000 in the first year, and of course I can't make promises on a system, but what I can say is I've seen this happen so many times that their websites are paid for in the first year, sometimes a couple years, but generally within the first year, the cost for the website's paid for just by having a website built to convert people. And so many of our clients are just over the moon happy. And it's funny because it's to the point now where I'll approach clients who haven't had a new site in 4+ years. And realistically, your site should change every 2-3 years. You should have a living, breathing website. And I'll approach them and say, hey, let's get you a new site. Let's get you kind of caught up. And they'll be like, I've got no complaints about this one. This one's still converting for me. And it becomes hard for us to do the sell on the next website because the previous one's working so great. So I think, if anything, by hearing this, I want the listener to understand this. Your background shapes who you are. No matter how good, how bad, whatever the experience is, without that experience, you aren't the person that you are today. Something else would shape you differently, potentially. And so you need to embrace your past, even if it's not a past that you would like. Me being a Christian, and this is me kind of going into faith here, but I also strongly believe that God's directed my path through life, and that regardless of what's happened and how horrible, I'll tell you the exit of the coffee business. I kind of, like I said, I didn't go into too many details, but it was bad. I thought my life was pretty much over. I had small children. I had a wife. Matter of fact, I think I had 3 of my 4 children by that. No, it would have been 2. I had 2 of my 4 children by that point, and I didn't know what to do because the business that I was now taking on was not earning money. We were going into debt. We went into substantial debt. And while I did own part of the coffee company, I ended up selling that ownership for next to nothing to try to salvage a family dynamic. And that next to nothing was enough to pull me out of debt. Mostly, I still had debt, but it got me to the back to close to zero. But without that, I'm not where I am today. And I believe God used that to teach me things that I wouldn't have known otherwise to get me where I am today. And honestly, I fully believe that if Wapiti were to die tomorrow, if I were to get no more business and lose some clients and have to shut down and just go get a job or start something new, I fully believe that Wapiti was just a huge stepping stone on that path. Now, if you ask me right now, I want Wapiti to be the final stone. I don't want to keep making steps. And to be fair, Wapiti looks great. I'm happy with it. I'm happy with the direction it's going. 2025 has been a really, really rough year. I'm recording this on December 10th, and I'll tell you, 2025 has been awful. But the beauty of the way my business is established is I'm still fine. I've got clients who rely on me month to month for things. I have really good retention because I do really good work for my clients. And yeah, I'm hoping 2026 picks up. It already looks like it might be. I've got a couple potential projects to get going here that both look very good and very hopeful. And if they don't land, I know that my direction is still heading the way it needs to. So I think that'll be it. This is, over 37 minutes now, and I knew it was going to be long. I'm glad it's not at the hour mark, but I just wanted to share that, and hopefully whoever needed to hear this heard this, and at the very least you got a fun little story about some random guy. Yeah, thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to Sell More Online. My business, Wapiti Digital, was built to help businesses with sales-focused website design, e-commerce, learning management systems, membership systems, and we also love working with nonprofits. That means donor management, nonprofit websites, the works. Reach out anytime. We'd love to help. Visit us online at wapiti.digital to learn more. That's WAPITI.digital